Welcome to Business Success Tips. We learn to make more money in less time and have a lot more fun. I'm your host, Paul Sanneman. I'm founder of Contractor Staffing Source. We help contractors build great teams. I have as my guest today, Christopher Jasinski, and I'm going to try it again, Kyle. Is it Bobinski, right?
You
Close.
nailed it.
Okay, so these guys are good at raising capital. And I know a lot of people ask me, well, I could use a couple $1,000,000, but how much my company do I have to give away for it? And is it worth it? What kind of equity do they take? And that kind of thing. These are the guys going to ask that question. So I guess the question is, I have a company and I could use some capital because we talked about earlier in another podcast, the big guys are coming in and kicking my butt. Right? Because they can afford to do marketing, advertising. I've been in Kansas City for 18 years. I got a really good roofing company, and some guy just came in from nowhere and is out spending me on marketing, and I'm going to get killed. So, but I've got a great company. I'm doing 3 million. I'm making, 800,000 profit. Um, I need some cash to compete. Is that something you can get?
At that size, you can get cash. You're going to have to give up control to be
Okay.
that size. If you're a bigger player, if you're a, 40, 50, $60 million revenue roofer, and you want to expand even further, you potentially do not have to give up equity you don't have to give up control in order to raise
But
equity.
even if I'm willing to give up control, let's say, okay, you guys are better than me. I'll do a 60-40 split. Um, what kind of cash can I get and how does that equity thing work?
Yeah, so if you're going back to the $3 million 800K company, I think it'd be just being honest, I think it'd be tough to get 60-40 split. You're probably looking at something like an 80-20 or a 90-10, right? Your ownership goes way down in that scenario, and you probably just become an operator at that point. That being said, you get more capital to go play with if the company believes in you, and they would because they're giving you equity. So I think you could get anywhere between, $3 or $4 million doing that.
Okay. So how do I know, let's say I'm a builder, let's say I'm a builder, all right. And I'm doing 30 million and I want to buy some more property. I haven't got the cash to do it with. I need, 5 million in cash. Banks are the most cooperative people in the world. Can I go for private equity and get some cash?
All right. So on the home building, land development side, you want to think about your business as two separate businesses, your home building company, and then anything you do with land and lots. And they need to be totally separate. And you want to try your hardest to own 100% of the home building company. And if you want to dilute yourself, you want to do it on land and lot deals. Because the value, if you ever go to sell the business, is on the home building company. Also, you can lever this business much higher. You can get much better traditional commercial bank loans. You get much higher leverage ratio on the home building business, 90 to 100%, right? For anything you're building vertical. So it requires less capital to run this business. So I'm going to answer your question, but that's the framework you need to think about a home building company. And if someone's small and hasn't reached that size yet, as they graduate to that point, you want to have separate entities. Most builders will have a home building company and then a series of land cos, separate SPs, single purpose entities.
Right.
So to answer the question, if you need capital, you want to raise it for the land deals. And you're willing to give up profit on the land deals to own the home building profit, because that's where there's ultimately value and it's the lower risk proposition. So yes, there's equity. I'll come back to equity for the home building company because that's a more complex answer, but there's definitely equity and debt in various creative ways for land deals. And
so
that
let's say I've got a guy, I'm looking at it, he does 60 million a year, right?
Yeah.
Maybe makes 2 or 3 million. He would like to go buy a whole ton of land, right? But he hasn't got the cash to do it. And banks are not that cooperative when it comes to buying land. They're, well, you got it. We'll give you a 50-50 split or something, which is like not good for him. And they want 50% equity in the land for him to buy the land, which makes it a little limited for him to buy a bunch of land, right? So could you come in and say, okay, you need 10 million to buy all these lots so you can continue building, right? And we'll separate that from the building company. So the building company is doing 60 million to build stuff, and it does, everything vertical. The land development company is a separate entity, and I can help fund my acquisition through people like you to get equity to get acquisition, right?
Absolutely. So we're doing that every day. And the scenario you just described is really happening today. So let's just say it's 10 million of land and you can only get 50% leverage. That means you need 5 million of equity to do that,
Right.
those land deals. The industry's quickly expanding and being more creative there's a couple ways you could attack that. One is there's private debt. So not your local commercial bank. And depending on the profitability of the deal, your history, the location, et cetera, you'll get anywhere from, used to be able to get 15, but now it's only a 20 to 25% equity required to do that deal.
Okay.
So now you're only talking about 2 million of equity to do.
Well, that's
10,
half what the bank requires, so it's still a good deal, right?
Yes. Now that debt's going to cost you more than the bank,
Right.
but that delta is a lot different. So if you go before the second half of 2022 and interest rates rose up, maybe you were paying 5.5, 6% on your A&D loan, and the private debt was 15%. So it was a 10% difference. Today, that's still 15% for a small guy, cost the big guys less, but 15%. But your commercial bank's already charging you 9.5, 10 anyway. So it went from a 10% increase to 5%. But you get a whole lot more leverage. There's also land bankers that will do the same thing. Land banking and private debt are effectively the same from a cost of capital standpoint and amount of equity required. The only difference is private lender, the asset, the land sits on your balance sheet and they lend you money, versus a land banker or lot banker, it sits on the land banker's balance sheet and you gave them a deposit.
Right.
It gets
But then
developed on their
when
balance sheet.
you buy the lots, you have an agreed price for the lots. And let's say you're selling the lots for, pick a number, 50,000 a lot. You're only going to make maybe 10,000 on the lot, but you're going to make another 20,000 on the house when you build it, or 50,000, right?
Correct. So you're giving up some profitability because of the higher cost of capital on the land side, but you're keeping all the home building profit, which is the lower risk and higher leverageable component. So
When
that's,
you build a company, then that company, say I go from building, 60 million to 80 million or something like that. My company's worth more because I've got a company that's building like crazy and it's profitable, and the building company is separate from the land company, right?
exactly. So before it's 60 million to 10%, you're making 6 million in profit. Now you're doing 80, making 8 million. That's worth more. And by the way, you can control more land. And if you control good, profitable land that you've created value with through your ability to acquire it well and the entitlement process, now you've built more intrinsic value, enterprise value for the business with the same amount of equity. And you've done it with less risk.
That makes sense.
Because the private debt and the land bank is non-recourse. So not only do you get higher leverage, it's not part of what
there's no risk, right? Because they're taking all the risk, not you.
Yeah. So part of that premium is it's no longer recourse, which is why I say the less risky is the home building side, because even though when you're still small, you're gonna have recourse. You get bigger, you won't, but you're gonna have recourse. But a spec home is a lot less risky, or a pre-sold home, than a half-built lot.
Right.
So if you have to have recourse anywhere, you want to have it on the vertical side.
Right. Now, next question for you, Kyle. Let's say I got a roofing company, and I'm interested in acquiring some other roofing companies. And I'm like sort of the big guy in Kansas City. I'm doing 10 million or whatever, and 8 million. But I've watched these little guys and I'm going, wow, I don't have the cash to buy these guys out. But if I could have a partner who give me some cash, we can do this deal together and buy some of these companies. Is that a possibility?
That's absolutely a possibility. So the equity provider group there, it wouldn't be big private equity funds. It would be smaller family offices and potentially high net worth individuals, kind of club money where you club it together from a few different limited partners. Yeah, so there's absolutely
maybe or 3 or 4 million, it wouldn't take a lot to make that happen, right?
No, no, exactly. 3 or 4 million, and you would pair that with probably, like, to Chris's point, probably some private credit. No,
Mhm. Cool. So in this case, if people are looking for equity, they're willing to give up some of their company, some of the land, whatever they need to do, but cash is an issue. And the banking system isn't being friendly to them, for lack of a better term, right?
Sure.
Banks, I think banks only loan money when you don't need it. That's sort of the rule of banking that I know of, right?
Yeah, that's
So
why we're in the golden age of private credit.
that's right. So if the banks have not been the friendliest in getting capital, and people want to get a hold of you to get some private equity that's more reasonable, even though it's more expensive, if you can't get it, it doesn't do you any good anyway, right?
Right.
So if you guys are looking for capital to grow your company or anything like that, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, you can email me at kyle@jtwadvisors.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Or you can
So-
email me, chris@jtwadvisors.com, or go to our website, jtwadvisors.com.
Okay. So if you guys out there want capital to expand your businesses and the banks haven't been your friendliest person, you don't have a bunch of rich relatives you can call on, I suggest that these guys are definitely a plan B here, that they can call them and they can probably get the cash to help you grow your business at a reasonable rate. So thanks, guys. I appreciate being on. This is going to be really helpful with those guys that want to grow their businesses.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.